So what I noticed right about the play, even from just reading a brief summary about it, was that it's kind of meta, if that's the word to use. But the whole play is about a theater company that goes to Laramie and interviews people to try and make a play about what happened there. So it's a play about making a play, right? And I just think that's kind of cool to put the two together. I know it's not like, groundbreaking, but I think it's still pretty cool in and of itself. So what values are represented in this play? Well, first I put accountability because, before in the interviews, people were kind of saying, this is a pretty great place. Everyone's pretty happy. Everyone's pretty accepting. Nothing really bad happens here. It's a pretty decent place to be. And of course, after the incident with Matthew, people start to think, oh, maybe we're not so accepting here, or there might be some bad apples in the bunch. So it really kind of makes them think about how their town is and some things about it that might not be so great. And the second one is kind of two mixed together. It's compassion and community. Now, the town really banded together after Matthew's passing. Now, and that is in support of his family, the gay rights movement, and they attended the vigil to honor his memory, and they gave the family privacy when they wanted that, while some individuals really rather just stay away from it because of either their religious beliefs or just personal opinions. Now that just kind of gives some context into the residents of the town, how they think and what their day-to-day life is like. Now, because the play was published in 1998, I believe, or at least that's when the events of the play occurred, I wanted to do some research into the, let's say, attitude towards LGBT individuals in the late 90s. So an article from the New York Times said that the gay rights issue of the 90s was like civil rights of the 60s and women's rights in the 70s. And there was apparently a senator in the 90s that showed public opposition to the homosexual lifestyle, and he called these people degenerates, weak, and sick, and he kind of passed it off as a condition that could be cured or should be cured, as opposed to just a way of being like we see it today. And one source even goes on to say something about the homophobic epidemic of '98, which was mostly a result after the death of Matthew Shepard. Now, this kind of attitude continued up into the 2000s, up until some legislation was passed protecting gay people in 2009. This kind of just gives a little insight into what everyday life was like, in the United States as a whole at that time. I'm assuming small towns would have been a little more conservative, just in general. And now, question number 4 is the issue of diversity. This is probably one of the more diverse plays we've read in terms of sexuality. Laramie as a character is live and let live. People seem to be pretty, accepting of things, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So they more so tolerate behavior that they don't like instead of accepting it. It's out of sight, out of mind, They prefer not to think about it, and they're not mad if it's not in their lives, but once they see it, they're not super happy about it. And it becomes especially apparent after Matthew's passing that there might be some more work that could be done in terms of acceptance. Now, I don't really think this kind of thing could happen in Columbus because I know Columbus to be a pretty liberal city, living pretty close to it for most of my life. And it could happen anywhere because it only requires a couple bad people to do something like this. So 3 examples of how the plot in the Laramie Project is different from an Intimate Apparel would be the early point of attack. There's a very lengthy build-up into the main events of the story. And there's also a ton of different characters, which is a common feature of episodic structure. And there's a lot of individual episodes in the play. So we have, every little title is called a moment in the script. There's interviews. There's several different opinions that are shared. And that is different from Intimate Apparel because instead of, one character's perspective throughout the play, we see that there's several smaller subplots and perspectives and opinions that build on the one main story centered around Matthew's incident. We get more insight into individual characters' opinions and thoughts, which make the play more personal, and it kind of suits that small town vibe that we're getting. All right, and finally, my 2 questions about the play. That's 4. 2. Now, why do you think the creator of the play chose not to have Matthew Shepard appear as a character in the play? Now, the Laramie phrase, live and let live, do you think that was an accurate phrase or reflective of how people actually were prior to Matthew's passing? Or do you think that was just what people said at the time? And do you think it wasn't so enforced or very popular or actually carried out?